after we're done here. So listen, here's where we're going to, you think you guys had a bit of, anybody have conflicting information for what they thought and try, anybody have some stuff to kind of take away from here? Kind of, we're going to re-look at that again, look at the book and kind of investigate this a little deeper. I know some guys were talking about the idea around step one, around this end, around the power thing, because a lot of us are hearing new ideas for the first time. We've heard a lot of different stuff. When challenged, it doesn't make much sense, right? Like me plugging that light into that window and using the window as a power, it doesn't make sense. It needs to be personal to me. They're very specific. That's why they say, as we understand him. Your own conception of that means, you like Renee call it Jesus Christ, but that's his conception. It's none of my business what he thinks. Buddha, and whatever, Jehovah, I call it a frequency. But the basis of that is, do you need to tune your radio into this frequency so you can get sound out of it sufficient enough to lead you out from where you are? That's it, the new experience. So, when they talk about here, which was really cool, back on 62, it talks about walking through an arch which we walk a free man. Right? They talked about that in 62, this archway over here as a concept. Here on page 75, they talk about it as an experience. Right? I've just finished my 5th, and they're talking about going home and reviewing it. They talk returning home. We find a place where we could be quiet for an hour. Just the concept of being quiet for an hour and being able to achieve that is pretty wild at this time, right? When was the last time anybody experienced quiet for an hour? No, yeah. I mean quiet, like quietly talking to myself for an hour, or quiet? Okay, sir. So, taking this book down, well, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better, meaning this power, this entity, this energy, whatever you want to call it. You're okay with the term God because your own conception, what you call that, is entirely up to you. But the basis of the same is the same experience. This is first 100 men and women that they talked about, the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. It's the same for all of us. Where does this originate from? It's the same for all of us within. So, carefully reviewing the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we walk a free man. Now they're saying I have the recipe for this arch. What does that mean? I have the recipe of being able to acknowledge there's a shift in my energy or attachment to something, to step back from it, pray, redirect my energy, or ask for a different shift in how I look at things. The ability to do that, because usually, well, we've seen how we used to be, right? So we're going to look at 6 and 7 because a lot of people love the way I look at 6 and 7. This causes a lot of disturbance because you hear people go, nobody understands 6 and 7. You ever hear people say that? It means this, it means that. Well, I always tell people, read what it says. Most of us read what we think it says based on other people's teachings, or other people has expanded on it because they don't understand what it says or what it's talking about. Remember they talked about here, and this is a lot of my own spin and my own experience with this stuff. What makes sense to me when you look at step 11 and where we're at in this process. Back when they started, what's our first obsession? Self. Self. They just say self, right? And exerting self-will to fix self. Me fixing me with me. Anybody ever have that problem here? We already passed the idea that don't work. So they're saying, but there is something that can work that create a shift in me that isn't me. It's a byproduct of something, right? I'm not creating the shift. I don't create the light, but when I put the elements together, it creates the light. So here they talk about, they talk about if we have emitted and if we're trying to build, have we skipped on the cement to put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? We know what that looks like. If we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. What's indispensable? Willingness. Are we now ready to let God, who? God, remove from us all these things which we have admitted are objectionable? What are all these things we have admitted are objectionable? Just did our 5. We just did our 4. Huh?
Are defects of character?
Does it say defects of character?
No.
So no, but I'm saying the challenge is, what are the things we admitted are objectionable?
Self.
So let's back up. Let's back up. So if you want to know what something's saying, back up to what the source of the information started from. So they told us that what's our problem at this stage of the game? We suffer from spiritual malady. And what blocks us off from these things are the things that we carry, right? Manifestation of a spiritual malady, spiritual sickness. What's the first thing they said demonstrates spiritual sickness? Resentments. Fears. Conduct. Harm. Anybody carry those things?
Of course.
So when you're done your 5, anybody realize you still have some of these things?
Yeah.
You're still attached to these things, these resentments I have in the conduct, would they be objectionable? Yeah. What, were you thrilled with them or what? We see that these things were derivative of my spiritual condition. These things have caused my demise. These things are the things that's eating my lunch. They're killing me. Right? I need to be free of these things, but I see I can't be free of them. That's why they said, I'm reconfirming step 3 here, that I can't create the change within myself. So the first step to be freedom, but I know God could, and what if He were sought. So am I ready to have God have all these things that I'm still hanging on to? You'll see what I mean by that. Because if we think a lot of us think it's my selfishness, dishonesty, and inconsideration. But that's the derivative of my spiritual condition. Right? They're not the things I'm hanging on to, because those show me what I am hanging on to. Why are you selfish? Because I get this from her. Why are you doing this? Because I need this to survive. Why are you still doing this? Because my social instinct's not working. My ambition, my attachment. Why are you still angry with those people? Because of what they did to me. They're objectionable. I went through that list, right? And as we go through this, they talk about here the things I still hang on to. And I see that I don't want none of these resentments or this pain or the fear or the conduct. I want it all to be gone, because I see the destructiveness of the nature of it. I see what I look like on a non-spiritual basis. That's what my 4 says. My 4 doesn't say what I used to be like. It says what I am like. Based on what? Based on a non-spiritual basis, right? Those vehicles, the selfishness, the inconsideration, and the dishonesty, they need to be attached to something for me to see them. That's my response to an instinct. Why were you selfish? Because I was afraid I was going to lose something and not get something. My instincts out of whack. The vehicles, the selfishness, the inconsideration, and the attachment is the people. That thing is not the problem. It's only the vehicle. It's the attachment, it's the thread, right? So when they talk about here, let's look at it. They talk about, are we now ready to have God remove all these things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. What the hell would I be hanging on to? How many people did a 5th here? Okay, when you're done your 5th, how much stuff are you still hanging on to?
Yeah.
Huh? Huh? Lots. But you know what they are now, and you see how it eats your lunch. So you know what? This thing with my dad, when I found out he nearly killed me when I was an infant, and it put me in hospital causing a rupture, and I was black and blue and causing tremors, I'd eat my lunch because I want to get even with him. What my mom did and the people did and all that other stuff, even though I was able to understand forgiveness toward them and pray for them, I still carried some deep stuff. I mean, some really deep stuff, right? So I seen these things were still eating my lunch. Not all the time, but they would come up every once in a while. They'd resurface. And I kind of went, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. Police. There's still, every time I seen a cop for years, I get an anxiety. I'm not even doing nothing wrong. Get anxiety, work, anticipate groups of people. See, my attachment to these ideas and these things are still causing me problems. But I'm willing that God should have all of them. But some of the things I hung on to because I was justified to hang on to them. Anybody? Yeah, because I got to get even with them. And I'll talk to you about that in the 8 and 9. It's pretty amazing stuff, but I know what they are. So they talk about here, if we still cling to something, we'll not let go. That pain, the attachment. You notice that anything is still the pain attached to it. It's their story that we're attached to it. It's eating our lunch. I can't separate myself from it because of the injustice or the pain that's still associated with that episode. You notice when you think about it, you're still in that moment of living in it. But now you get some some distance from it. You're able to separate emotionally from it a lot faster because of the prayers and all that, but it's still there, right? And if you find yourself, that's where they talk about 10 and 11 later. When ready, we said something like this. Oh, sorry. If we will not let go of something, we ask God to help us be willing. That translates to, you know what, I still know I'm still sorry I'm carrying this. I'm still sorry I'm doing this. But I'm willing that you take it and give me something better in its place. As soon as you give me something better in this place, I'll be able to let go of this. Give me the ability to be free of this thing. That's kind of pretty good, even though I know I'm still hanging on to it. But I'm willing that you should take it, right? So that when ready, we said something like this. My Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me. Good and bad. Whoa. Good and bad. I thought it was just defects of character we're working on here. Why does it say good and bad? It actually says good and bad. You notice that?
Yeah. Because I don't know what's good and bad.
Good and bad. So, when you look at that, when people talk about 6 and 7, what do they talk about? The bad. They've deceived themselves into believing when they're doing good. When I'm not stealing that, look, when you talk about, well, no, wait. Your Honor. No. Okay, right? So, what happens is they say, look how good I'm doing. I never did this for a week. When you're concentrated on bad things, who are you concentrated on? Who are you concentrated on?
You. Self.
When you're talking about how great you're doing, who are you concentrating on?
Self.
You ever see a coin? How many sides to a coin? Two. Either side you concentrate on, you're still concentrating on the coin. You're still concentrating on you. Right? So, this is saying, stop concentrating on you. Because you can't fix you. And we'll get into that. So if I can't fix me, that's why it says good and bad, because I suffer from a subtle form of delusion. Anybody ever apologize to somebody here for trying to do them a favor? I don't know why you're mad at me. I was just trying to help you out.
Yeah.
I didn't know you needed all the money. Anyway, I was going to tell you a couple other jokes. Okay, let's go with this. So, one reader says, my Creator, now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness. What stands in the way of my usefulness? Every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness. When does that happen? Now. Every single defect that stands in the way of my usefulness. When? Now. Who determines that?
Self.
Does it say self? Here's a list of things I want you to work on, God. When you find a time, I'd like you to take care of this, take care of this. Not this so much, because I kind of enjoying this, and this. Anybody? It's saying here, the formula, it says here, it's really cool when you read this, right? It says, I pray you remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness. Now, it stands in the way of my usefulness. What's God's will for me? To live in now. But if I'm not present, can I be living in a now? So if I'm attached to a defect of character, which is an instinct, because one of my instincts are being threatened, and I'm acting selfish, inconsiderate, and dishonest, it's not the selfish, inconsiderate, and dishonest that's causing me problems. It's my spiritual condition attached to one of my instincts trying to fix me with me. That lets me know when I have a problem with my tooth. What's the symptom? The first symptom you have a problem with your tooth. Pain. There's something wrong. Is that the problem or is that the symptom? Character defect is a symptom of the problem. It isn't a problem. So I have to get down to cause and conditions. What's causing this thing to happen? And then I have to treat that, not the pain. Anybody ever treat the pain of a toothache and think the toothache's gone away? You know what happens after you ignore a tooth problem? It's called an abscess. That's recovery. You know what happens when you ignore a problem? It becomes an abscess. Okay, sorry. So, ready? What stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows? Grant me strength What am I praying for here? That's it. Power to carry. Grant me strength. What's my problem? Lack of power. If I'm stuck in the dilemma of lack of power, then who's going to show up? My fourth step. This is what I look like in my fourth step on a non-spiritual basis. My fourth step shows me what my life looks like when I'm trying to run it. It's not how I used to be. This is the way I am. People say, oh, my old behaviors. It's not an old behavior if you're still doing it. It's a behavior associated with a person that's not spiritually well. This is your go-to. When you're not spiritually well, you show up. What does you look like? This is what you look like in the fourth step. When Tony starts showing up, this is what it looks like. This is what I become. It's in the fourth step. What saves me from the fourth step is my spiritual connection. Somebody say, what makes you say that? Glad you asked. Here we go. So if we kind of read further, it's really interesting here. It seems like we're talking a lot longer, a lot of stuff going on here, right? So, they said, as I go out from here to do your bidding, amen. We have now completed step 7. Completed. What is completed? Step 7. We didn't complete step 6. We've completed step 7 as willingness to know what my part is in all this thing. It gave me the recipe. I'm only praying for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out, to go from here and do thy bidding, to be in the present, to be free of those things I'm still hanging on to. If I'm still hanging on to them, I'm still stuck in 6. My 6 is associated with my past. Step 7 is associated with my future. And who's in charge of my future? God. Who's in charge of right now? Me. And how I direct myself. Because I need to ask. I have free will. I see the benefit of living by these principles. If I don't live the principles, then I pay the price. And I can't afford to pay the price anymore. Right? Because I know disobedience to these principles will lead to my own demise. Because what I need is a daily reprieve from the fate of step 1. Because the promise of step 1 is I'm going to return to the trough. I'm going to be a dog that returns to its vomit. I can't help it. And the only thing that saves me from that fate is the path that was led before me. You know what they talk about? Rarely have we seen a person feel has thoroughly followed our path. You know where they get that saying from? The Second World War, the people that used to walk through the landmine would put a path together. And they say, if you put your footsteps in my footsteps, you'll make it through this mine. You'll get through this. And that's what they're saying here. It doesn't have to make sense, but if you're willing to do this, once you experience it, you look back and go, whoa. This is amazing. Not somewhat thrilling. This is amazing. Your story will absolutely blow your socks off. You'll sit there in a moment of amazement within your own life, in a moment beyond anything you could ever comprehend. But you need to experience that to understand what we're talking about. And once you experience that, no further explanation is necessary. You always know what you're moving toward and what you're trying to achieve, and it goes to greater and greater heights. So when they talk about this, they talk about what I'm talking about here. It says, now we need more action, right? Without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we had harmed to whom we're willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. We now go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past, which we attempted to sweep away the debris which we have accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will. To live on self-will. So what created all that pain and agony in the past? Self-will directed on me based on my instincts trying to create security, contentment, and happiness at the expense of everybody around me. I become instinctual, animal-based. There's a kind of fight or flight. And there's a lot of wreckage behind me, and I don't understand why I'm doing now. When I look at my 4, I see the way I operated here is because my spiritual depleted, and I was more instinctual based than spiritual based. That makes sense. And these people that said they were spiritually based no longer had this level of wreckage in their life. So if I'm going to get freedom for me, I need to find a spiritual answer to the dilemma called me. And when I tap into this source, then there's less of me that shows up. So I'm clearing away my effort to live on self-will. Right? which had accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. So the 4 steps shows me what I'm like on a non-spiritual basis. I am not thrilled with the information I'm finding. A drastic self-appraisal. I feel like shit. My sponsor said you should, based on the stuff you've been doing. You should feel like shit. When I did my 5th step, I was sweating. The humiliation. But I knew I had to do it because my life was on the line. I talked about stuff I swore I'd never talk to anybody about. And I went through it 100 miles an hour. He didn't stop me and go, well, you're kind of inconsiderate here and selfish here. Can you see the child within showing up here? That wasn't the point of the exercise. In the 5th step, it shows you the point of exercise. The willingness to show humility. Fearlessness. And you ever see those things? If I could exhibit those things, they tell me I'm on my way. That's the point of the exercise, is the humility of the need to do this because my life is dependent on it and I need to get access to this source. That's a whole different approach to this, right? A lot of people finish the 4th step, and a lot of treatment people and people who've been through treatment start on the behavioral modification course here. They start working on themselves. Look at this behavior, look at that behavior. See how it's tied to this, see how it's tied to that. That's the way they were taught. But when you look at this, it says I acted that way because I was spiritually sick. So in order not to act that way anymore, I need to get spiritually well. And when I'm spiritually well, am I acting that way? No. So my acts that where they talk about I'm praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry them. I'm praying for power. Because when I'm spiritually right, does my life look right? But if I'm working on me, who am I working on? The problem. It says being convinced any life run on self-will or run on your thinking or you on the effort of trying to fix you leads to our own demise. And they're kind of saying that here, right? So I'm convinced now, am I convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has been blocking me over, the life force from within? So now I'm on a different basis because I'm tapped into this energy field that I was separated from. And it's more at peace and more at ease. I comprehend the word serenity. I can be comfortable within my own skin. The first time I did this and I slept like I've never slept before in my life. And when I got up, I had this intuitiveness inside. I don't know how to explain it. It was my 6th sense. It was that voice that showed up again and said, kind of like, how you doing? Good to see you. It's been a while. Can we work on starting to rebuild your life? You're tired of being an animal. Are you really willing to do something different? And now, as I go through this, I have my list, my 8. And what's really important, what a lot of people do, is by the time I get to my step 8, my mind has shifted in how I look at these people, places, and things. The mend within inside of myself has already taken place. I'm at peace with this stuff. And if some of the 6 and 7 is still attached to it, I pray for the willingness that I don't bring that up or associate that when I go do my 9. Right? I'm going there to clear my wreckage of the streets so I can find freedom, regardless of what they did. And I tell the people I went and approached, like my stepfather, that guy, he was the most meanest man I ever met in my life, but I made amends for the stuff I did to him because I tormented him. I grew up as a kid. If I can make you lose your temper, I win. Regardless of the consequences. I'll take the busted nose, but I win. You lost it. like nuts. I don't know, like teachers, the whole society, I was like that. I threatened everybody. So when I came to my 8, my 8s were done. In order to successfully do 9, what would you have to do to successfully do 9? How do you know when you start on 9s? What would give you a good indication to do your 9? Well, it kind of talks about preparation there. But this is what another thing that a lot of people say, I can't do 10. You ever hear this? I can't do 10 because I haven't done 9. Anybody ever hear you say that? You got to go from step 8. Actually, when you do your 8, you got your list. You should be in 10 and 11, 12 while you do your 9s. If you're not in 10, 11, and 12, you can't do your 9 successfully because you're relying on self. And self will allow you to get through those spots because in 10, they talk about when these things crop up. For something to crop up means it already exists. And it's my attachment to these people, places, and things. Right? And so what happens when I become spiritually depleted, my old idea on how these people used to be and how they are come back to the surface. Anybody ever do that? Everybody? My dad. Every once in a while, I think of what he did to me, because I found out what he did to me when I was 22. I was loaded and I was trying to get sober. I phoned my mom. I'm crying. I said, "What's the matter?" Because I knew I was an animal. Like there was something fundamentally wrong with me. I couldn't really explain, and it was kind of like because I left my daughter with her mom, and I thought the best thing I could do for these people was get out of their life, because what I did was I was kind of having a couple beers, and my daughter was standing at the table. She wouldn't listen. And the third time I went to mention it, I found my hand in the air, and I was going to whack her right off her feet. And I went, "Oh my God." And how do you explain that to people in AA when you already know they don't like you and know how they feel about that other guy? How are you going to tell anybody? I never told nobody. What I did was left. So the best thing I could do for these people is to leave them alone. That was my go-to with everything. I never felt welcomed or wanted anywhere. They'd do New Year's, I'd go sit in my car just so you wouldn't have the uncomfortability of wishing me a Happy New Year's. That's whacked out thinking. That's a level of separation. But inside, I just kind of like the love of AA. And so when it came to this stuff, when it came to my dad, I had to learn how to love him carrying this thing. And I said to him once, I said, "I know what you did." And I said, "I forgive you for it." I said it in the letter, and I said, "We don't have to live that way, because I appreciate you in my life, and I appreciate what God did for you, and I appreciate having known you. I got introduced to AA." It took a long time to do that letter. See, what happened is my dad in a blackout, my sister just died, and I phoned I phoned my mom, and I'm loaded, and I'm crying. I said, "There's something wrong with me. I've looked at these 4 steps. I've looked at my life, and there's something fundamentally wrong with me. The way I think, the way I react, the way I look at it." I said, the hallucinate when I was a kid and all that other stuff. And it was like I used to have this. My mom used to give me Valiums when I was a kid so I could sleep, because in my room every once in a while I have this hallucination of this monster. It was purple, and it'd lift the lid off the top of the house, and it would start smashing me, and I'd be in my bed crawling against the side screaming for my mom to come in. I'm like 4 and 3 years old when this is happening. Purple. And it was wild, and I'd have this reoccurring every once in a while. And I think that's a pretty whacked out thing for a kid to have. And I'd wake up in closets, and you couldn't hold me in any kind of way, and I'd go in a blackout and all that other stuff. And I had like a rupture on the inside that I had to get fixed when I was 9. Like I suffered a lot of trauma, and I couldn't put my finger on what the trauma was. And so when I phoned my mom and I asked her, she carried this guilt, and this was in this process that I had to learn how to forgive her and stuff, like forgive this whole process that I carried in 6. My mom started crying. She says, "Your sister just died. We lived in Sudbury on the other side of the tracks. Your dad came home and he was in a blackout. He asked me to perform something for him because he thought he was entitled to sex. You were crying in the crib. And I said, I had to take care of you first." She says, "That's all I remember. I came to on the floor. And she said, I heard no noise coming from your crib." She said, "I went to the crib, and she said you were black and blue from your head to your toes." He beat the living crap out of me, and it caused me a death experience. Just thinking that a human being can do that is far beyond anything I could. And it cost me a lot of years of my life. And I knew that truth, and I used to think about blowing his head off. Every time I got loaded, I left the army, I'd think and fantasize. I knew how he got home. I was a sniper kind of marksman in my field. Not hard. I used to fantasize about this idea. A couple times I came back drunk and I said, I want to take him on now. I carried this idea. Never told nobody. Nobody told anything. So now this man is a member of AA, and also he left me standing in that courtroom. So when it came to doing my 4 and my 5, I had to look at him like a sick individual that he couldn't help doing what he was doing based on the story he had. Because, see, his mom left him at the bootleggers when he was born. And the people down the street took him in. Right? And he's native, and he grew up hating everybody and everything. Like his story is horrific. When I look at he had a life evangelist and all. He sober. He was probably one of the most craziest sober people I ever met in my life. I used to have a set of shoes at the front door, set of shoes at the back door. He never experienced this on the level that we experience here, but he did. He was sober. So what happens was, and he was a good man in the community, and he died before his 40th birthday. 40th year of sobriety. So what the significance of that is that he had throat cancer, and I went and visited him on a constant basis. This one time he said something, I wasn't spiritually fit, and he said something to me, and I turned to him and I said, "You want to try me now?" I said, "I'm not a kid." And I realized what I did. I went, "Oh my God," because that voice and that thing would reoccur every once in a while. And when I was spiritually fit, I was able to pray and keep it away from me. That moment, I turned to him and I said, "You want to try me now?" And he's sitting there with cancer, dying. And I realized what I did, and what I did was something that may not make sense to you. But I got down beside my father and I hugged him and I asked him for forgiveness for the way I was acting there and my inability to be free of the things I was still carrying. That was a really pivoting moment for me because I love my dad. Because of him, my life took on a whole new meaning. I knew that if I didn't meet my dad, I would have died an alcoholic death. That he got sober to intervene in my life to give me the life that I have today. So when you can kind of look at life like that, it's pretty wild. So when my dad passed away and I was doing my lines with him, it was a long living amend. Years, because he was a mean son of a bitch, sober. He was just something the matter with him, like he wasn't fundamentally right in his head. But I knew that about him and I was able to pray and change us. Like we're fishing. He's dying of cancer. He's got another year to live. We're out on one. I pay money to go fishing with my dad. Anybody, you think it's a nice fantasy. I'm going to go fishing with my dad. Isn't this wonderful? 50 years old and I'm going to go fish with my dad. What a dream, the dream of my lifetime. I get on a plane. I fly to Toronto. I drive 8 hours to where the cabin is. I get out on the boat with him. He can't talk because he's dying, right? So I go, "Hey, this fishing rod don't work well. Can I have one of those good fishing rods? You got 4 fishing rods there." He goes, "No." I said, "This one sucks." He goes, "Yep." I said, "Let me use that one." He says, I said, "How come?" He goes, and I thought, "You miserable bastard." I said, "You do realize I paid money to come here for this experience to fish with you?" And he went. And then the other part of me said, "Well, you do realize you'll be dead this time next year and I'll have all your fishing gear." See, I thought that, but I didn't do it. But I took that moment, and he made it horrific, but I didn't allow that to change my moment with him. Does that kind of make sense? Because of my attachment, I was able to pray, redirect that energy, and I just loved him. And the week he died, I spent 2 weeks with him, administering medication to him privately. Me and him, privately. I've been in other situations with other people where other things have turned out different. I was private with him. And as I talked to him about what he did and the impact he had on my life back then and how many years it took me to get to a place where I am. And I'm talking to him because he can't talk back, he's in a coma. And I said, "I'm asking God for the strength to love you in a way that you weren't able to love me." Because I said, normally I'd put a pillow over your head and nobody would know but me and you. I'd make you pay for the demise that you caused me because you need me right now. You need me as much as I needed you when I was an infant and I was helpless lying there. And what the difference between me and you is I have a gift and I have the grace to allow to love you in spite of what you did to me. I was pretty wild, and I spoke at his memorial and I thanked him for the experience of having known him, being a better man for having known him. Because he passed the gift of AA to me, even though I didn't know what that gift was. It took 11 years before a member of AA carried this message to me. And that's what I did in 8 and 9. I found peace in that, but I still carried the 6 because those memories and those things would come back and I'd have to pray to put them back in order. Does that kind of make sense? But it got right sized that when he needed me the most, I was able to show up and be the son that I would never have ever been without Alcoholics Anonymous. That's deep stuff when you kind of look at that's what's available here. I'm not capable of that shift because I've made every person pay who's ever done anything to me. From a young age, years anticipating, calculating, can I take them now? Can I take them now? And I waited, and I waited. People, those 3 people that beat the living crap out of me, 16, 2 of them were in a room at my mom's place talking to me, and my mom's boyfriend said, "Hey, let Tony give you a ride." And she says, "What, that little bastard?" And I went to the door and I locked it and I turned around. I said, "Yeah, this little bastard." So remember what you did? And my mom, and they were all horrified because I was like 8.5 years old when that happened. I said, let's make the odds even now. There's 3 of you and 1 of me. I'm 16 years old, right? And I locked the door. My mom stood up and she went to defend him. I said, "You sit down. Mind your own business." I said, "You weren't there to defend me in the past and you're not going to defend them now." And I said, "If I were you, I wouldn't get in my way." That's deep-seated resentment, eh? That's the way I used to govern. But now, when I do this thing, have a peace and a love with my mom is beyond anything you could ever imagine. Where did I get that stuff? I got that from the 4. I found peace with me through connecting with a power that I didn't understand, doing a recipe that didn't make any sense. Because this stuff used to eat my lunch, right? And what happens in 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 is, now I get to see how God shows up in my life. And where you really see God show up is in the 9th step. This is what determines your sobriety for the rest of your life. Honest to God. That's my experience. So 2 fast stories, and then we'll kind of break and we'll get into 10, 11 tomorrow. So as I'm doing these things, a lot of, when I backed up, people in AA would tell me, you need to pray and ask God for whatever, because the contract on page 63 talks about he'll provide everything I need if I'm willing to keep close to him, perform his work well. In the beginning, it was help me. I need help with this and this. People say God don't provide jobs. God provides me with everything I need. So I went to my brother one day. Remember I told you about the bikes. I'm newly sober. I can't get sober. I'm nuts. I'm socially unacceptable. They want me to go for assessment. I came back from a meeting after talking to my sponsor. Rent's due next week. I'm not on welfare. I stopped doing things. I stopped doing organized. So I'm trying to live a whole new life. I've found God. Anyway, so I'm like, not. So my brother goes, rent's due next week. I said, it's okay. God's got this. He goes, oh my God. He turns around, walks back into the house. And I believe God had this, right? So that night, I looked in the paper, which I've never done. I got a job that I started the next day. I worked a week in construction, and I got paid the following Friday. I had enough for rent and car insurance. Saturday, I went to work and got fired for threatening the foreman. But he provided all that I needed. It may sound kind of weird, but I got what I needed. You know what I mean? And then other times I've kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen, whatever. And praying for knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry it out, 6 and 7, praying for strength. And sometimes it's kind of like, God, I need some direction here. When I was getting the DTs, I prayed, help me. I was going over the bridge, the tires squeaking, and I said, God, everything stopped. I went home, went to bed, and it went away. Got up the next day, and it started again. But I got relief from it. So one time I walked downstairs. My brother said, hey, can you do me a favor and go get my videos? Tell you how long ago that was, and return them for me. I said, are you kidding? I said, I'm trying to find a job. Like, I really need to get work. And then I phoned my sponsor, let him know my woes. He says, God's got you. Do you believe God's got you? I said, yeah, but I don't see how. I've been thinking all week, and I can't figure out how God's going to do this. Anybody ever do that? Ask God for something, try to figure out the whole week how he's going to do it? I return the videos. I walk downstairs. The phone rings. As I'm walking down, I answer the phone. Hey, is your brother there? And I said, no, he's not here. He says, well, this is LNS. Say, we're looking for welders. He says, you wouldn't happen to be a carpenter, would you? I said, yeah, I am. Why? He says, can you start tomorrow? Union job, LNS, right? Yeah, right? I started a job that I didn't even apply for. Got it from a situation where I was trying to help somebody else. Right? Then I got into a car accident, like as a result of a lot of different things, because it seems like my life goes to crap when I take over. I don't know if anybody's experienced that. I'm so thankful to God for everything in the beginning, and then I start, I'm doing good. I'm counting my paychecks. I'm not living in the moment anymore. And then something would happen. I don't know if God does it. God says, oh, you're doing great here. Let me step back. Let me see how good you're doing. And then I show up. Yeah, and then catastrophe happens. My first sponsor got me a button that says S happens. You ever see those buttons? Everywhere I went, stuff was happening all the time because of my energy, right? So it was kind of, as I was going through my 9s, I seen how God was showing up in all these different ways, these coincidences, power, these opportunities. My needs were being met beyond anything I could ever imagine. So I went back to Montreal to go visit these people that I know that didn't like me or want anything to do with me. But I had to go back and make amends because I'd crash weddings and Christmas parties. I'd show up in blackouts and do horrific things while I was there. And it got to a point where they would have family reunions or weddings and say, don't tell Tony. Don't tell him where we're getting together. Don't tell him where the events are. And everybody was okay with that. So now I'm going back to Montreal. I'm taking the bus from here to Montreal because I can't take a plane because I still have warrants for this other stuff. But I need to make peace with my family. So they told me when you get on the bus back then is don't sit in the back, sit up front. You know what happens in the back of the bus? And they said every time you get to a bus depot, ask over the PA if there's any friends of Bill W. Right? And that way you could have a mini meeting in between stops. I take a bus from here all the way there. I'm listening to tapes, cassette tapes, to give you a rough idea. I'm reading the Grapevine. I'm reading my big book. I'm talking to God. And as I got closer to the place, I started going to God, you said you would look after me. I have those talks with God back then, right? I said, you said you'd look after me. You have a promise on page 63. You're not fulfilling your end of it. I'm not finding this funny at all. I said, you're dropping your ball. I'm talking to God like this. I'm on the last part of the journey from it was North Bay to Quebec, the last part of the bus trip. I'm getting closer to Quebec, and the anxiety is coming higher in me. And I'm talking to God now. I'm getting more like, you're letting me down. I can't believe it. You said blah, 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 blah. Like I'm kind of ranting inside of myself. Anybody ever do that? And I'm screaming. This lady goes, you okay? Like she goes, you okay? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm fine. You ever see boxers that got almost knocked out? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. So I say, I'm good. She goes, I said, yeah, I'm going to go visit these people. I haven't seen them in a long time. I think it's been 10 or 15 years at this time. And I haven't seen them. Last time I seen them, it was pretty horrific. I'm going to go back to clear up some stuff in my past. She says, I had to do the same thing. She says, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 20 years. I went, ha, I looked at, and I went, ha, funny guy. See, what I learned through this process, God was there all the time, but I couldn't see him because I was too entrapped in myself. Provide all that I need. Here's a lady, what are the odds? A lady of Alcoholics Anonymous, 20 years sober, sitting with me at the last journey of that ride.
It's ironic.
Yeah. See, in that moment, what carries me in all my other dark moments. And so now with this moment and all that seeking power, it kind of goes, wow, there's something to this. And so as I go through this, more weird stuff happens, stuff that I can't put my finger on. It's stuff beyond anything I could ever imagine. So in 11, I'm asking in my morning meditation, what amends do you want me to take care of? I'm praying for direction from him on what I need to take care of. People are showing up. Things are starting to happen beyond my comprehension. So we talk about here when I had to go turn myself in, I was about 1.5 years sober. And the people in my home group said I had to go do it. I'm 2 years out here. I'm 1.5 years actually sober. And I'm going to go turn myself in, and I got a lawyer prepared, and everybody got ready for me. I'm looking at penitentiary time, and it was kind of like, I'm going to go face this thing because it's eating my lunch for me. And I just can't afford for this not to happen. So I go to Toronto. I turn myself in. I got a lawyer, and they're denying me on bail on everything. Right? And so what happens is I'm going back to City Hall. They give me bail on some charges and deny me on other charges. While I was in jail, I never felt more freer. People was asking me what I was doing in jail. They're going, what are you doing here? Says, you're like a big light bulb in this place, man. I was in the drug cells at that time in the Dawn. I don't know if anybody had the pleasure of being there. In the holding cells, right? So I'm going back and forth to City Hall to give me bail. And while I'm praying for knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out. I'm not praying for knowledge of my will for him and power for him to carry that out. I'm not praying for things, I'm praying about things. And while I was in there, I was 12-stepping, guys. Praying for the strength. I said, if this is your will for me, give me the faith to allow me to live it. What happened is I ended up getting bail. And I came out here to sign on my own reconnaissance, which was unheard of with the John Howard Society. I was supposed to check in once a week. Physically, because of the association and all that stuff, the people who were going to give me bail, the gang association, wanted to give testimony why they didn't want me on the streets anymore, why they wanted to deny me bail. I got bail. Not only that, I was allowed to come back and live in BC to set trial date. I went back to set trial date and I sat with my lawyer. I happened to meet a lawyer because a guy that I met to go see my sister when I did this gave me a card. He died shortly afterwards, but I passed with him. And it was like God's operator saying, here, give him the card. He gave me the card. I phoned this lawyer. This lawyer was coming, the chief prosecutor for the Toronto area. He was in with everybody. He heard my case. It was a charter of rights case, and he told the judge and everybody about it. When I went back to trial, I went in. The gang squad and the drug division was involved. There was about 10 cops there to give testimony because we're under surveillance for about 6 months for the stuff that we're involved in. They wanted to give testimony on my case to present of the conviction. My lawyer said, come in here right now. I went in, he said, plead guilty. I said, I plead guilty. He says, now go. I said, what? He says, you got a $500 fine for failing to appear. All of the charges have been dropped based on the charter of rights and the entrapment and everything that happened. The same lawyer with that situation, before I went out there in 86, when I came out here in 87, says I was looking at penitentiary time because I was going to take fall for the whole group of people I was involved in. I was the fall guy for everybody. And that was the best sentence he could give me, was 2 years plus a day. This lawyer says, I don't know what you've been doing. He says, I've never seen anything like this in my life. He says, you must be kissing angels. He says, I don't know what's going on with you, but you better hang on to it. The lawyer, there's something that happened, because what the people told me was, you're serving a power greater than any power you'll stand before. These people don't determine your life. God does. Trust God, clean house, and help others. And we'll get together tomorrow for 11 and 12.